Chapter 60. Rielle bravely confronted Hyun-Ki. Akio held Rielle's hand as they left the scene, and before getting Rielle in his car, he had Rielle's arms and looked at her worriedly. "How do you feel, Rielle? Are you alright now?" Akio touched her forehead and felt her hands. "Your hands are still cold." He lifted her hands toward his mouth and blew them, rubbed them to warm her hands, then massaged them and squeezed them. "This is to warm your hands and let your blood circulate." Rielle couldn't help staring at Akio, admiring his kind-heartedness and warmth. Shed of tears began to show in her eyes, and Akio couldn't help but embrace Rielle, first lightly, then tightly. "I will always be here to protect you, Rielle. You could always count on me. And when you feel like talking, and need a shoulder to cry on, I am here, ready to listen." Rielle was grateful for Akio's chivalrous action, coming between her and Hyun-Ki to protect her. After Akio assured her that she could always rely on him, and lent his shoulders to cry on, Rielle realized how warm-hearted Akio was. Rielle thought she could not escape her past and felt she needed someone like Akio, who could understand and confide her feelings unconditionally. Rielle decided to open up. How far will Rielle and Akio's close friendship go? Rielle willingly opened up to Akio. For the very first time, "Akio, it is time to tell you the real score between Hyun-Ki and me. Can we talk? I am ready to listen, Rielle. I know of a place where we can talk privately." Akio came to her and held her hand gently. They entered the hotel and walked to the lift, and once inside, the two were silent, Akio staring at Rielle intently while Rielle's head bent down, staring at the floor. The ride reached the rooftop, and Akio held Rielle's hand and led her to the beautiful roof garden, surrounding them with bright lights emanating from the buildings and several sconces around the hotel. With grown trees and shrubs planted to make it appear like one is at the center of the woods, the ground was grassy and different orchids were delicately hanging on the trees' branches. Planted flowers and leafy plants were all around, perfectly manicured. Strategically placed everywhere were steel with wood benches, and Rielle chose to sit close to the garden's parapet wall. The sky hovering over them was pitch black, and a few stars were sparkling bright as if commiserative with her feelings at that moment. Rielle began to tell her story. "I ran away from Hyun-Ki and hid from him. I was hurt when I saw him with a woman and heard she was his fiancée. I felt enormously disappointed and hurt, because I never expected him to replace me that easily. It was my fault, though, why we separated, but I never expected that he was that fast to forget me." Rielle paused, thinking of where to start, and bravely opened up. "I had selective amnesia for almost 3 years, and I completely recovered only very recently. Hyun-Ki and I fell in love during my amnesia, which I never knew I had because my family kept it from me. I thought I was living an everyday life until Hyun-Chul came along. I didn't remember him, and all I knew was he was Hyun-Ki's brother. Hyun-Ki and I fell deeply in love, while unknown to me, Hyun-Chul was trying his best to get closer to me, to get me back. And because he couldn't keep his real feelings toward me, he confessed that we were once lovers from the last year of high school until we graduated from college. He didn't stop pursuing me until one day, I woke up after seeing him in my dream and fell so in love with him. I remembered everything good about him. I was so in love with him, having sidestepped Hyun-Ki. I forgot about his love for me. I completely stayed away from him, because of my resurrected feeling for Hyun-Chul, until we decided to get married and leave Hyun-Ki for him. My family was against marrying Hyun-Chul, because they discovered something about my fatal accident with Hyun-Chul. If my mom had only shown me the bloodied passport before deciding to marry Hyun-Chul, I could have never dumped Hyun-Ki. I had amnesia for almost 3 years because of that accident, which Hyun-Chul was the cause. We were about to elope, fly to Singapore, and live there, but we met an accident along the way because I was so angry at him, having found out that he was cheating on me, and his dad even insulted and mocked me. And while we were quarreling, that's when we had a near-death accident. Both of us were unconscious. It took Hyun-Chul 1 year to recover in Korea, and I for 8 months, but I lost a part of my memory. When we were about to marry, Mom gave me my passport, and right there and then, I remembered everything about the accident and Hyun-Chul's cheating on me. I canceled our wedding and tried to catch up with Hyun-Ki, but he was gone. Later, I came to the resort and discovered that Hyun-Ki owned the place, and he was with a girl my age and introduced her as his fiancée. I ran away very hurt and came to this town. I decided to stay and work here for a while until I got over my painful memories back home, but unfortunately, I learned that Hyun-Ki had the same plan as mine, through Hyun-Chul, when we accidentally met at the city's bank. I told him not to tell Hyun-Ki about my stay here, because I didn't want anything to do with them anymore, and if ever we crossed paths, we would rather be strangers. So, that's it, my entire sad story. Rielle gave a forced smile to lighten the mood around them. While Akio was so concerned about Rielle, he held her hand, assuring her that things would turn out well for her. I will always be here to protect you, Rielle. I could not let a good friend down, smiled Akio encouragingly. The following Monday morning, Rielle was back to work. She was conversing with a client, and at that sliver of a second, the man Rielle was talking to about opening an account got so angry at Rielle, causing everyone's attention. I am asking you to help me open a time deposit, but I may not be approved just because I only have a few dollars? If you cannot, I can go to other banks. You effing bitch, yelled the man at Rielle, which made her shocked and pensive. The man left relentlessly, leaving everyone shaken but curious. Mrs. Echeverria approached and tapped Rielle's shoulder, asking Rielle to her office. What has happened, Miss Calma? Probed the manager. I was suggesting another way to deposit his money in dollars, and required him to show me his passport. Then he immediately got mad and yelled at me, which I think has no probable reason to, Rielle explicitly said. If you need assistance, tap your office mate sitting close to you, so we can avoid situations like this, especially since you're still a trainee. Is this clear, Gabrielle? Mrs. Echeverria stressed. Rielle nodded and was almost in tears, because her shock had not subsided yet, so Mrs. Echeverria asked her to rest a little while before returning to her post. After that incident with an angry client, Hyun-Ki came in. He stood there momentarily, observing Rielle, and when Rielle got a glimpse of him, he looked the other way, then proceeded to Mrs. Echeverria's cubicle. Mrs. Echeverria was surprised to see Hyun-Ki without an announcement that he was coming to the bank. Good morning, Mr. Han. What was the pleasure of your visit? Mr. Han sat in front of the manager's desk and looked smug. Could we talk somewhere private? Mrs. Echeverria felt something odd, but she stood, walked across Hyun-Ki, and showed her hand the way to the conference room. This way, please. She opened the door for him, and Hyun-Ki walked straight to the conference table and pulled a chair. He sat, leaned over on his elbow, then spoke. The Board of Trustees already advised you about my half-ownership of this bank. Am I right? Mrs. Echeverria nodded, saying, Yes, sir. And congratulations, the reason for this visit was not about my ownership but about Miss Gabrielle Calma. I want you to fire her from this bank, and I don't want her working in my bank. Mrs. Echeverria, she was shocked. I couldn't do that without legitimate reason, sir. That is against labor law, protested the manager. Well, in that case, I would be forced to remove everyone in this bank and hire new ones, including you, Mrs. Echeverria. I will just say that this bank is under new management. What do you think? Hyun-Ki was adamant about pursuing his plan. Mrs. Echeverria thought for a moment. She could not let everyone get affected because of one person. She recalled the incident this morning and would use that as her legal basis to fire out Rielle for incompetence. All right, Mr. Han. You won, and ensure I will act on it. Immediately Mr. Han smirked, squinted, and said, Now, could you get Miss Calma? For I want to say something to her. Don't worry, our conversation would be of a different matter. Mrs. Echeverria closed the door softly behind her, still wondering why Mr. Han wanted Rielle out, and what their meeting could be. She went to Rielle's desk and tapped her shoulder. I wish to talk to you in private. Rielle was surprised, feeling uneasy. She thought about the incident with a client a while ago. She followed Mrs. Echeverria to the conference room. Rielle opened the door, and she saw Hyun-Ki standing by the window, his back against Rielle. She looked at Mrs. Echeverria inquisitively, but the latter only gestured, saying she knew nothing. Rielle sauntered toward Hyun-Ki, and he likewise turned to face Rielle with a smug look. I never knew you were working in this bank until today. He moved closer to Rielle while she stepped apart, removing her gaze from him. Why did you stay in this town, Rielle? To have high hopes of me finding you here, and chasing you again. I never knew you'd be staying here, Mr. Han. All I wanted was to stay here for a while to take a breather from everything that happened to me, and I needed a break. Come on, Rielle, stop all the pretensions. You wanted me to find you here, so I would beg you to return to me, wasn't it? As Rielle was about to protest, Hyun-Ki quickly took her into his arms and kissed her. Rielle was surprised by Hyun-Ki's sudden move. She fought to free herself, but the more Hyun-Ki held her tight and kissed her hard. Rielle refused to return his kisses, and when she could lose his grip, she took no time to slap him hard. Hyun-Ki's cheeks were reddish,